Inside the Birds is back. Geoff Mosher and Adam Caplan here. We're going to continue our 4-part series previewing the NFC East with the help of Greg Cosell, who's been fantastic. He's done Washington with us. He's done the Giants, and now we're going to go ahead with Dallas. But first, Adam and I want to get into some news surrounding the Eagles because obviously the loss of Brandon Brooks to an Achilles tear is still making headlines. And Doug Peterson, Adam, recently spoke with reporters on Zoom, and then he did an interview with WIP with Angelo Cataldi in the morning. So we want to get into a few of his comments and just kind of set the record straight on a few things, if you will.
Yes, we do.
So let's get into that really quickly first. I think he made people kind of, I don't want to say panicked or surprised when he said in his Zoom press conference that Jalen Reagor is going to line up at the Z spot where Deshaun Jackson lines up and learn from Deshaun at first, because people kept reaching out to me. Does that mean the Eagles literally just used their first round pick on a backup wide receiver? And I'll read you the quote, Adam. It said, quote, he's going to come in and he's going to learn one position and he's going to learn from Deshaun Jackson and learn everything he can. Obviously, the playbook's extensive, and we just have to see what he's taken from the offseason to training camp. And then once we see his potential and growth, we can use him in multiple spots.
And by the way, that's what you reported on our show a month ago, that he wasn't just going to be lining up in one spot. And that's what Doug was trying to explain. What he meant was, there's a thing that I use, what the coach said and what he really meant.
Yeah.
We're going to get into Myles Sanders because finally he confirmed what we reported 2 months ago. So getting back, though, to the Reagor situation, it is smart because, as Peterson said throughout this offseason, he's used that term about on grass. No matter how well Jalen Reagor learns, you're not going to know where he's at until he gets on the field. And it's really hard for Geoff with receivers as rookies. It's not easy. So I applaud Peterson for just giving him one thing first. I remember Jeremy Maclin came in 2009. I was at his first practice. And it was a little bit of a struggle for me. He had some drop passes, and Andy Reid really got on him. There's certain things in my career that I can never forget. I remember Andy got after him. This is what happens at receiver, man. You're not in college. Like this is like going from the minor leagues to the major leagues. It's not going to be easy without an offseason. So I didn't overreact like some of the media did, and especially the fans on Twitter who had some stuff to say. But I think you guys are wrong, and I didn't really respond to it because I figured let's save it for a show as you've done here.
Yeah, and by the way, it makes sense to learn Z first because of the both positions outside X and Z. The Z is the one that's off the line of scrimmage and not pressed, and most rookie receivers don't see a lot of press coverage anymore in college, and so you want to learn that first, that he can actually play that position before you tinker with him at X or slot or anything else.
Though I want to add something. X is pretty much a static position. The X does not move around a lot.
Correct.
You typically stay in one spot. Frank Reich was talking about it, the Colts head coach, about Michael Pittman, their second-round pick from USC. He's going to play X, and he kind of has an idea in mind that he's going to stay there. You don't move him. Geoff outlined pretty clearly the Eagles' plan was to move Reagor around a lot, just like he was at TCU. That's the end game, folks. Had they had an off season, he would have had 24 practices. Well, quite frankly, Geoff, he probably would have learned the Y slot, not just the movement Z. Right. So when they get to training camp, they just got to see. So I have no problem with it. I didn't overreact like everyone else did because I know how coaches think. You're not going to give their first round pick too much on his plate. Get spoon feed him if he gets the Z spot. Because look, he learned it online in the virtual learning, but until you get him in the grass, you just don't know.
Yeah, and again, I think people forgot to read the second part of the quote, which says, once we see his potential and his growth, then we can use him in multiple spots. So there's a natural progression there, and we'll just see how well he picks up the offense.
I'll read the other part about Geoff, the other part of it, okay? But one of the things is this is the end of the quote here that Peterson had. But one of the things that all of our receivers really have the capability of doing is moving inside, whether an outside guy going inside or an inside guy going outside. That is true, though. I think JJ Arcega-Whiteside is an X. He is not.
He's the one guy that I'm not sure can play any other position effectively.
Right, and they tried him in other spots. And I know we've had our fans on our message board on Inside the Birds on Facebook. Please sign up. We just got over 1,000. we're getting, folks, between 9 and 10,000 listeners per week. We'd like, by the time the season starts, to get 4,500 to 5,000 and really get it going. But we appreciate the guys who are there, guys and gals who are there. We do appreciate your time. But so Doug is really he's giving the answers to the test here. He's not going to be a one-position player, and that's exactly the way the league saw him, by the way.
All right. Speaking of a one-position player, and that's Alshon Jeffery, who has been their ex since he's been here. Doug had some interesting things to say, saying that Alshon will be a big part of the offense when he comes back. Quote, Alshon's done extremely well this offseason with his rehab. I've not just Alshon, but with all our veteran players to be part of this virtual offseason like they have. I've been really impressed with everybody that's taken part, and Alshon is one of the guys. He also went on to say, I just want him to focus on his rehab and get strong, but he's a big part of our offense, and we do plan to have him in the offense at some point. Did that seem interesting to you?
Well, look, we reported, I don't know. It was definitely before the draft that he's going to be here. I probably would, if I could have it back when we were talking about in December. I'm not going to lie, I thought there was no way he could be back with the stuff about him and Wentz, which we clarified, and we got good sourcing on this. What happened was, Alshon just has to understand with the media, whether it's on the record or off the record, and explain exactly what he's thinking, making sure if you're going to talk to a reporter or reporters that you're not being taped, make sure that you're being clear, that you're not being critical. If you're getting some steam out, get some steam out. If you're upset about something, but make sure that it does not come out negative. And that is what a leader does. And Alshon just has to quite understand what he's saying sometimes. But the thing that is interesting about Peterson's quotes, and just add a couple more, he did say he's a big part of the process going forward. He's a great leader, and he's going to be able to help the young players coming along. Like, that is not something that I would ever hear Doug Peterson say. Now, I've been critical of some of Peterson's comments over the last couple of years. Sometimes he says stuff that not only was he wrong about it, I don't know he'll say something and it just winds up not happening. Though I think when you judge coaches, if you evaluate 32, he's probably in the top 10 of being straightforward. But sometimes he says stuff I go, he doesn't believe that. I'm gonna believe him here because I've talked to the Eagles privately. I spoke on our show a couple of months ago about why I thought Alshon's going to be back. Mm-hmm. They thought internally that the stuff that had come out on Alshon was way overblown about he and Wentz, that the relationship was better than people think. They gave me some reasons why, and okay. But the bottom line is when Doug puts his stuff out there like that he's going to be able to help the younger players, be a mentor. And he is 30, by the way, and he's a great leader. I've never heard him say that. In fact, I've never heard anyone say it on the record or even off the record, quite frankly.
Yeah.
Geoff, I don't know about you, but I've never heard that before.
Like maybe he's trying to pump up Alshon's value to the rest of the league. I don't know.
Whoa. Kind of interesting. So wait, I gave you 100-1 odds that he would not be traded. So
that's right.
That was before I had to ask the Eagle, anyone who would know what was going to happen with Alshon. And by the way, he suffered the injury against the Giants December 11th. So really, he's only in his 6 month of recovery. This is a 9 to 12 month recovery.
Right.
It's extremely iffy for the first month of the season for September. And by the way, Doug didn't really give a timeline. He doesn't really know. He didn't give a timeline, but we're going to have some more information coming over the next week or so on Alshon I'm working on. But sure. I'm going to take Doug to finish Alshon off here in terms of his future. He can help them. He has one thing that he's really, really good at. He attacks the football. And J.J. Arcega-Whiteside, who could be his eventual replacement at X, that's something he can learn about. Yeah, he's good at contested catches, but there's a difference. Alshon Jeffery, in 17 and 18, before he started slowing down, he attacks the football like in a big-time way, and there's something that J.J. can learn from him that I'm told about. Someone mentioned to me, someone from the Eagles had said, hey, this is something that J.J. can learn about. So I'm going to take Peterson at his word, and I'm going to call him out if he's full of bleep.
All right. Well, we will do that. Brandon Brooks, Doug Peterson suggested that they're looking at every option, which we said they would do, inside and outside, in-house and free agents. But it sure sounds like they've got guys that they're going to give in-house, starting with Matt Pryor a chance. And so I don't know if you have any free agents that come to mind that you think that they're going to be looking at.
My what we had put on folks, if you haven't seen our ITB TV that we did really within an hour after Brooks got hurt, after the news came out of Brooks, just to give you a couple nuggets. What I'd said is my understanding was Pryor was going to take over until they decide whether they're going to sign a veteran or trade for one. Let's get into a couple guys here. Let's get into Kyle Long, because I think, and I get people like him as a player. Kyle Long is 31 years old. I've talked to Bear sources about him. They really like the guy, but they couldn't even count how many surgeries he's had. But here's a fact: 34 missed games in 4 years, Geoff. We reported at the Combine the Eagles are done with injured players. That turned out to be 100% correct. This is the mantra. Then Howie Roseman confirmed it to the media when he actually spoke about what he told Doug Peterson, where he talked about, is he healthy? Can he run? And whatever the other comment was. That's actually true. That is 100% true. I'd be shocked if they signed Kyle Long. Also, by the way, so what happened was he said he was retiring. Now what he's saying is, he actually put it on Twitter. I retweeted it when I saw it. So, and I'll add something to it, talking to people. What he's thinking about is either coming back to play, but he doesn't want to go back to the Bears. The Bears wouldn't bring him back anyway. Or I'm told he would actually go into the media. I know he's got some TV people interested in him, I'm told, by television source, I guess you could say. Fact of the matter is, he's a gifted player, but at 31, Geoff, and he actually said in his tweet, he doesn't know if he's got anything left. He's been so beat up physically. And by the way, the surgeries are actually pretty significant, and you worry about a guy. You worry about a guy's future, man.
Well, I mean, he certainly had an ankle issue last year, and when you're an offensive lineman, and footwork is so key, and you've got a busted up ankle, and that's the type of injury that you can keep re-aggravating. But one thing, Adam, I'll add to you is from my sources on Kyle Long, is that he's a guy who, for the first few years of his career, he was always very gifted athletically. And then, as you mentioned, when the injuries happened, his body started to wear down. He's not someone, I'm told, who has taken great care of himself to make sure that now that he's, been injured, that he's going to get his body in the best shape. And because of that, I've told he's been very, very inconsistent the last year or two. You can see it on the tape. There are games where he's clearly feeling better from a body standpoint and looks pretty good, but then the next week or the week after, he's just not the same guy. And so the Bears were able to sign Germain Ifedi, right, for I think a minimum salary contract.
Jermaine
Ifedi, yeah. And
by the way, they think he's going to start. Talking to them, they think he'll wind up starting. Believe it or not.
Exactly. So while Kyle Long, I was told they feel could still play in the league, they're able to get Germain Ifedi for much less money, and so it made sense for them to want to move on. Now he eventually retired, but it sounded like they were going to move on anyway. But it just sounds like a guy who was very traits driven earlier in his career, but the injuries have taken those traits away, and he just cannot duplicate what he once was, and has not put himself in that position to be able to kind of use technique. This is what I'm told. Some guys, this happens to a lot of guys, right? They're not the physical specimen they once were, but they can rely on techniques, fundamentals, and other things to compensate. And Kyle just hasn't been able to do that for the last year or two.
Yeah, he's played guard and right tackle, by the way, in his career. At his height, Bears first tells me most athletic lineman they've had in years. His body, you're alluding to that, is broken down way too much. Now let's fast forward it to the Eagles. They cannot afford to bring in someone who they can't depend on.
Right.
They're not in a position. Matt Pryor's barely played. I know you'll love, folks. Greg Cosell is going to break down, obviously some great stuff on Matt Pryor, and I know Greg's got some interesting stuff on Matt Pryor. But the guy started one football game. They have to bring in a veteran. They don't really have a choice. They have to add someone. If they're going to indeed go with Pryor, Geoff, they've got to have an insurance policy. You can't. They're at a point when we did that show a couple of weeks ago on the Eagles' depth issues. The reason why we did it, Geoff, is because when I was studying it, I was like, they got a real issue here with depth if somebody gets hurt. Maybe I jinxed up Brandon Brooks, but I just think, like, if you go in with Matt Pryor and they know more than we do. So Geoff, let me ask this question. Nate Herbig, Jack Driscoll, what other choices do they have?
Well, interesting, because another source that I spoke to from the NFC North, who has scouted the Eagles and has put a lot of tape work into them, told me to not count Nate Herbig out in that right guard race with Matt Pryor or anybody they might bring in. Okay. He's also remembers Herbig from when Herbig was at Stanford. He thinks he's, a typical tough Stanford offensive lineman. He liked his tape last year in the preseason, which is one of the reasons why Nate Herbig was able to earn a spot on the 53. Herbig can play center, so he's a natural replacement for Jason Kelce if he wants to get hurt. But at Stanford, I believe he played guard. So correct. He can play that position. And so, hey, look, this will be interesting to watch. Pryor is the leader in the clubhouse right now, just on paper. Yep. But let's see if Nate Herbig can make it a competition.
We'll soon we're going to have updates on kind of the veterans they're looking at. But fact of the matter is, Geoff, this is a huge blow losing Brandon Brooks. There's no way to sugarcoat it. As all the positivity they've had this offseason in terms of adding speed, and they did what we said they were going to do, doing that. This is a setback. There's no other way that you could say it. I mean, Brandon Brooks, you could argue, is the best guard in the National Football League. He's certainly one of the top three. It's a real shame. And, the shame of it is now that this is 3 straight serious injuries, 2 Achilles injuries, his right and his left, and he's coming back from a dislocated shoulder. And the next time he's going to play football, assuming he doesn't come back for the playoffs, the Eagles are in the playoffs. I mean, he knows how to rehab a Achilles injury. Boy, did he do a great job with the first one. My God.
Yeah. Well, let's just hope. I'm sure the Eagles hope that he can be.
Yeah.
That he can do
but he won't play. Way. You mentioned on the ITB TV, and it's definitely right. Realistically, he's probably not going to play until he's 32 years old.
Right.
I mean, you don't know if a guy misses a season, what he's going to be like. And one thing I do want to add on Brandon Brooks, so I put this on the ITB TV if you haven't seen it. But I just want to let people know that back in March, because he was on the roster, his 2021 salary became fully guaranteed. That's $10.4 million. So he definitely will be on the team in 2021. They could get out. There's no fully guaranteed money after 2021. But the fact of the matter is now you lose him. And I know people ask us on our message board, Geoff, this offensive line is not going to be as good. I don't care what anybody says. There's no way.
It's going to be very difficult. I mean, you lost theoretically right now. There's no Jason Peters left tackle and no Brandon Brooks. That's 2 really good offensive linemen. So
we'll see. Jeff Stoutland is a magic maker. I mean, the guy's a great coach. But this is going to be
not a miracle worker,
right? This is tough. But people had asked us on our message board before we move on to the regular stuff, the Myles Sanders stuff. Hey, how much of a blow is it going to be? Will this hurt Wentz's production? It's a great question. I can't remember the person who asked it, but it's actually why I wanted to bring it up. It doesn't help, Geoff, and you're not going to know without an off season if it is Pryor as a full-time starter. He's done it at this level. He was drafted to be a tackle. Guy's 6'7". He's a massive human being. I don't know how he's going to do as a full-time starter, man. They need to get a veteran in there for competition. If it were up to you and I, we're bringing a veteran in because
I imagine that they will. And we'll see,
we'll see what they do.
And so real quick, because you talked about a great question, Angelo Cataldi on WIP morning show, he asked a really good question.
Yes,
Doug Peterson, that gave the answer that I think have validated what we've been saying for quite a while about Myles Sanders. And so the question was this, and I'm going to read it verbatim, and thank you for putting it to my attention.
Yes.
The question is, Doug, we're all speculating that it's going to be Myles Sanders as your main guy rather than a running back by committee. Are we speculating correctly on that? And Peterson's answer, and I'll read it verbatim. You are correct. Myles is our number 1. He's the guy we drafted last year. He had a tremendous rookie season. He's ready to carry the load, but you need a second or a third guy there to help that can help him. And then he, that's the end of the quote. He went to talk about Boston Scott being a guy who can be one of those guys. He went to talk about Corey Clement and the rookie free agents. But to me, let's not bury the lead. Myles is our number 1. He's the guy we drafted last year. And when he was asked if it's going to be main guy rather than running back committee, he said, you're correct. So I think what the confusion is, sometimes, if your backup running back or your third string running back get a few carries or some touches, that doesn't mean it's a committee. A committee is when you've got a bunch of guys and each one plays a different role one different week and there's no quote unquote lead guy. Myles Sanders is the lead guy. He just said it.
This is a great line I'm going to take. I took this from someone in the league I was talking to about Myles Sanders. And He had a great line. He goes, if Doug Peterson had Jim Brown in his prime, he'd still say he was a committee. Doug, I literally was tearing laughing. He goes, Doug doesn't know what a committee is. A committee is literally this guy gets 10 carries, this guy gets 7, the other guy gets 3.
Yeah, 2003, Andy Reid, Brian Westbrook, and Juice and Buck. That was a committee.
Right. A feature back is Myles Sanders. My numbers are spot on. The touch total I used, and I've been quoted everywhere, and I do appreciate it. It's 15 to 18 touches per game. Mm-hmm. It actually could be more depending on who they sign, if they do sign a veteran, because now they're with Freeman, unlikely to sign here unless he changes his mind on money. Oh, one other thing. This surprised me too. I know, I'm sure Angelo had some help with these questions, but Angelo did a great job. If Angelo came up with the questions himself, great. I'll give him credit. I'm a big fan of Angelo, so I'm not criticizing him, but the questions were great. And I guess he asked Doug about signing another running back. We had a possibility. This is Doug's quote. We had a possibility to sign a guy, but it slipped through our fingers. Well, gee, I wonder who that was. That surprised me. But see, here's my problem with that response. Yes, he was talking about Carlos Hyde. He didn't fall through their fingers. They were not going to pay him $3 to $4 million. It just weren't.
Yeah, I think that was.
I don't blame Howie or their front office. I don't.
Right.
I know what he meant. He wasn't criticizing Howie, but they just didn't get him.
Right.
Look, the bottom line is Doug is now confirming what we reported 2 months ago. There will be no committee. There was never going to be a committee. It was going to be what's called a rotation. Doug calls a rotation a committee. It's not. But what he means is other guys will get touches, of course. So before we move on and get out of here with this stuff, I do want to give you some numbers which are fascinating. So for fantasypoints.com, I did a piece on Sanders just to give you an idea of what it could be in terms of this just touches. And Brian Westbrook, you brought him up. I always thought Westbrook got 13 to 15 touches a game. And I thought that was a lot because you know how bad his knees were. After Deuce Staley left, after the 2003 season, listen to these touch totals. 04, 19.1. 05, 18.1. 06, 21.1. Now this number in 07, I looked up three different sources because I didn't believe this. 07. Now I know you got a point on this, but I just want to give the number. 07, 24.5 touches per game. Brian Westbrook, 5'8", 190. Are you kidding me?
Listen, it's crazy. And it's funny because, as you say,
I was way off for those numbers. I couldn't believe it.
I know. As you say right now, the plan is for Myles to touch the ball 15 to 18 times.
It's going to be, I'm going to tell you this right now, folks. If they don't sign Freeman, if they sign Shady, it might be 19 to 20 per game. I might be a little low.
I used to ask Andy Reid privately all the time, especially during those years, 2005, 6, 7, right?
Yeah.
I used to say, Carell Buckwalter, every time Brian gets hurt, Buckwalter goes in and has like 100 yards. And
it's great.
He was a third-round pick. He's overcome all these knee injuries. He's a very good player. Why don't you ever use him? And he would say, we want to, but there's two things going on. One, he doesn't exactly fit the offense the way Brian does. You could throw Brian the ball. You could line him up at slot receiver and do anything. With Buck, he's a little bit more restricted in what you can do offensively. And the second thing is, you notice those 2006 and 7, they were fighting for their lives. In 2007, they didn't even make the playoffs. They were in close games every year. 2004, they were blowing everybody out. They went to the Super Bowl. But in 6 and 7, the games were all close. They always were. And so you were not going to take one of your best weapons off the field. So that's why they can tell you, or someone can say, look, our plan is for Myles Sanders to get between 14 and 16 or 15, 18 touches. I guarantee you, if it's a one touchdown game, like 75% of the games are in the one possession game, Myles Sanders is going to get the ball more than they want to do.
Yeah, good point. I had not made that point. That's a really good point. And then 08, his last big year before his knees were completely done. 08, 20.5 touches per game. So you're talking about over a 5-year span, he averaged over 20 touches per game. We're talking about Brian Westbrook, folks, who I told Brian this. Jeff and I know Brian really well. I said, Brian, I'm telling you this, and people think I'm out of my mind. I said, listen, if your ACL injury that you had at Villanova didn't shorten your career, you were so special. I thought he would have been a Hall of Famer, but he never could. Andy Reid said he's the smartest player he ever coached. Brian's ability to scan for pass pro, he was so special. That one year you mentioned 07, he had like 90 catches.
It was unbelievable. I mean, it was LaDainian Tomlinson and Brian Westbrook, and there really wasn't. And I guess Tiki Barber was still.
For fantasy, he was unbelievable. Westbrook was unbelievable, and it's funny. Westbrook used to do a fantasy show. I don't know if he still does it with John Hansel and DirecTV, but it is really. People forget how special the guy was. Really an incredible story, and you see Clyde Edwards-Helaire, the back that the Chiefs drafted in the first round. You know where that's going. He's going to get a ton of touches.
I already texted Brian because somebody from the Chiefs said that they felt that Edwards-Helaire was even better at this point in his career than Brian Westbrook.
Whoa, really?
So I texted Brian that, and he said, he goes, the guy hasn't even set foot on the field yet.
Right. It's funny. Awesome stuff. Good stuff.
All right, listen, we have Greg Cosell to get to help us break down the Cowboys, Adam. But first, we got to talk about it. Support for Inside the Birds is brought to you by Manscaped, the best in men's below-the-belt grooming. Manscaped offers precision-engineered tools for your family jewels. They obsess over their technology developments to provide you the best tools for your grooming experience. And look, we all know what it's like. We're trying to groom. We're trying to get nice and manicured down there, but it's not easy when you're using one of those flimsy razors, right? That's why Manscaped has redesigned their electric trimmer. The Manscaped engineering team spent 18 months perfecting the greatest ball hair trimmer ever created and just released the new and improved Lawnmower 3.0. I've already thrown out 1.0 and 2.0, Adam. We got 3.0.
Wow,
that's how good it is.
I feel like we're back when they would get the Intel Pentium processors. We're now up to 3.0. I love it, man. Lawnmower 3.0, man. Wow.
That's right. So this third generation trimmer features a cutting edge ceramic blade to reduce manscaping accidents. You don't want those.
Oh, no.
And millions of balls are about to be nick free thanks to Manscaped's advanced skin-safe technology. Manscaping accidents are finally a thing of the past. And when I tell you this is premium, I mean premium. The battery lasts up to 90 minutes. You can shave longer. It's got water-resistant technology. Allows you to groom in the shower at your convenience. It's one of the coolest features, along with the LED light, which illuminates grooming areas for closer and more precise trimming.
They've also upgraded, Geoff, to a 7,000 RPM motor with quiet stroke technology, which, by the way, is trademarked.
Very important.
And let's not forget about the charging stand. Show your mower off loud and proud, because this intelligently designed stand is a convenient charging dock powered by USB. If you're listening to me speak right now, I want you to experience it firsthand for yourself. Trim that junk of yours, or your gazintas, as I've called them. 20% off and free shipping with the code ITB at manscaped.com. That's ITB at manscaped.com. Your balls, or gazintas, well, thank you.
All right. Well, get 20% off and free shipping with the code ITB, like Adam said, at manscaped.com. And that's 20% off with free shipping. Folks, that's a great deal at manscaped.com. Remember, use the code ITB. Okay, as promised, we bring back Greg Cosell, NFL film senior producer and host of ESPN's NFL Matchup Show. Greg, you've helped us break down the Giants. You've helped us break down Washington. I get a feeling the fans are going to be even more excited to hear you help us break down the hated rival of the Eagles, the Dallas Cowboys. And so we'll get right into it. And a lot like the Giants and Washington, we're discussing another new regime. And this one with Mike McCarthy now as head coach of the Dallas Cowboys. And I'm curious for your just overall. I mean, I know we had trouble with the Giants because there's not much on Joe Judge as a head. There's nothing on Joe Judge as a head coach. But what kind of touch do you think Mike McCarthy will bring to the Dallas?
You know, my sense is offensively, and he's an offensive coach, I'm not sure they'll look a whole lot different, Geoff. They have as good a back as there is in the league in Ezekiel Elliott. They've got a lot of weapons on the perimeter. They've got a solid quarterback in Dak Prescott. They've got a tight end who I think is very good. Fantasy people won't love him because he won't get volume, but I think he's very good in Blake Jarwin. So I'm not sure they're going to look a whole lot different. They maintained Kellen Moore as their offensive coordinator, and I'm sure they did that because they put up big-time numbers a year ago on offense and did move the ball efficiently and effectively. So I'm not sure their offense will look meaningfully different.
Greg, one thing that when you look at their offense, they're not going to have their outstanding center, Travis Frederick, who retired. Yep. So how much is that of a concern would that be at the center position?
Oh, it's a concern because you can make the argument that he was the best center in the league, certainly top 2 or 3. And they've certainly had an offense that has had a big-time O-line over the last number of years. So there will be a drop-off just because there's not 50 Travis Fredericks. So I think it will be a factor. The thing about O-lines is we never exactly know the kind of communication that's done, who is in charge of that. I'm sure Frederick was a major part of that. They just won't be as good at that position. And the one thing that he was very good at, and was a significant part of their run game, was they did a lot of pulling with the center and the guard, what we call the guard center pull scheme. And whoever they're going to line up at center that's not an easy thing to do for centers. Let's put it that way. Not every center can pull and get out in front in the run game.
How do you feel about, Zach Martin and Tyron Smith, La'el Collins? I mean, they obviously have some name value, but they've also battled injuries. Connor Williams has been in there. They drafted him a couple of years ago. How do you see this offensive line, which gets a lot of accolades? Is it as good as it's been?
The thing about Tyron Smith is I think he's a really, really good left tackle, but he's been getting injured a lot, and he's had back injuries, and I don't know if he's quite as good as consistently as he was a number of years ago. I think he has games and moments where you see what he is, and he's phenomenal because he was terrific. Collins is a solid player. I think Zach Martin is as good a guard as there is in the league, so they still have him. I think at left guard with Connor Williams and center, I guess it's Joe Looney. They did draft a center from Wisconsin. And when you draft a center from Wisconsin, the one thing you do know is that he's very well schooled in what would be viewed as NFL type run games. So we'll see who ends up being their starting center. But, I think their O-line is still solid. They still have some really good players. But I think the key thing is, can Tyron Smith stay healthy and play 16 games at a high level?
So, Greg, at the receiver position, it wasn't a need for them to take CeeDee Lamb in the first round, but he dropped them. They took the best player on the board. That's what you got to do. So you add him in there. Where do you think he lines up? Who lines up in the slot with Michael Gallup and Amari Cooper there, of course? How do you see those 3 guys being used? And then when it comes to spreading defenses out like the Eagles, who are not great at corner, how good could this passing game be?
Well, they've got weapons. I mean, I think that you'll likely see CeeDee Lamb line up in the slot. About close to 45% of his receptions last year at Oklahoma came in the slot. So he has a ton of experience playing in the slot. My guess is that's where he'll initially line up. Again, it's hard to know how much they'll do as far as moving him around because there's no on-field work. So my sense is that Cooper will be the Z, which is what he essentially was a year ago. Michael Gallup was their X. And I think Michael Gallup is a pretty good X. So they've got 3 very good weapons at receiver. Wide receiver, as I said, Blake Jarwin is an athletic tight end. He's a strider. He has vertical seam ability. He's good run after catch. So this is a team with a lot of weapons on the perimeter and even a tight end. So, look, they put up a lot of yards last year. We can always debate what the issues were, but they put up a lot of yards and they put up points. I mean, this was a pretty good offensive team a year ago.
So let's get into Amari Cooper a little bit, Greg, because he's given the Eagles headaches throughout the years, but he is, I think it's fair to say, for as talented as he is, he's also been inconsistent throughout his career. What is it that you see when you break him down that you think leads to that inconsistency?
Well, I know that there's a general belief that he's a great route runner, but I watched a lot of Cowboys about a month ago on tape. I ended up watching about 7 or 8 Dak Prescott games, so obviously I was watching receivers as well. And I have to tell you, I came away feeling that they struggled too much against man-to-man coverage and that Cooper at times struggled to get open against man coverage. Now, every once in a while, you'd see him run a phenomenal route, and he looked great. But overall, I came away from that 7-8 game study of their offense feeling that he wasn't consistently good against man coverage. So he has great games, great moments, but I think that there's some inconsistency in his play.
Greg, you mentioned Dak Prescott. Here's a guy that Eagles know very well. The NFC East obviously knows him very well. Very durable player, good football player. He's their franchise player. What did his tape tell you last season breaking him down?
I think there's a lot of up and down with Dak. He's got a good arm. He can drive the ball with velocity at all levels. I would say he's much more of a thrower than a natural passer. I wouldn't say he's a naturally aggressive, turn it loose passer, but he did show the willingness to make some stick throws when the game situation demanded it. I think he's not overly refined as a timing passer. I think he's much more of a predetermination thrower based on the route concept versus a specific coverage than he is a pure anticipation thrower. I think he's a little stiff-legged and rigid in the pocket, which also can impact his ball placement a little bit. His ball placement can be a little erratic, even on some completions, on a lot of crossing routes. He'll throw it behind guys a little bit, and even though they might catch it, it negatively impacts run after catch. I think that he's the kind of quarterback, though, that the moments are never too big for him. I think that he plays with poise. He plays with composure. He's got good second reaction ability. So there's a lot of pluses and there's some negatives that you try to work through. But he's a good, solid NFL starting quarterback.
Interesting how you pointed out almost that the predetermined throws, because sometimes we praise quarterbacks for being able to know where they want to go with the ball based on the defense that they see. But I think it sounds like you're suggesting there's also the extreme of just relying on that too much and not seeing the entire field as it develops throughout the play.
And there's a fine line there because coaches obviously put together schemes during the week. You know, they work 16, 17, 18 hours a day, and they put together their approach. And it's based on what they've worked on all off season through training camp. There's the pass game has concepts. So very often you call a play and it's based on some anticipation of what the defense is. That's why you make certain play calls. And so there's a very fine line between, hey, here's the play call. I anticipate that my primary is going to be open on this, so I'm throwing him the ball. You know, so it's sometimes it's hard to know, Geoff, but there is a difference between predetermination and anticipation, and you try to get a feel for that watching tape. And I would say he's a quarterback too that at times is a beat late with certain throws, and that's when I talked about not having an overly refined sense of timing. And when you're a beat late with throws in the NFL, sometimes that can be problematic.
Greg, let's turn our attention to the defense. And Mike Nolan's back. He's back coaching. Yeah. He's running a defense. He's been a linebackers coach for a while, formerly of the Saints. And Mike's been around the block. He's been a head coach. He's been in 34. He's coach of 43. But now I would think with their personnel, they added Gerald McCoy, Don Terry Poe, Bradley and I want to get to in a second because he's a guy I know a lot of personnel people like. What's his scheme look like to you?
Well, I mean, they'll be in a 4-3 because their personnel dictates that.
Okay.
I think they should have a pretty good front. DeMarcus Lawrence is a very good player. I think McCoy is your classic 3 technique and Poe is your classic nose shade 1 technique. So they've got players that fit a 4-3-1 gap defense. So that's what they'll be. In an ideal world, they've got 3 good linebackers, assuming Van Der Esch is healthy, because Van Der Esch is a good player. Certainly, Jaylon Smith is a good player. Sean Lee is back. We'll see if he can stay healthy. So you look just at their roster on paper, and their front 7 should be solid. It has good players. I think the secondary is where you've got some question marks. And at corner, they did draft Trayvon Diggs, whose tape I really like coming out of Alabama. But again, no off season, so we don't know. So I don't know. Is it Anthony Brown and Awuzie? I would assume Anthony Brown and Awuzie would probably be the starters at the corner position with Jordan Lewis in the slot. Jordan Lewis is a good player, by the way. But Brown has been sort of up and down, certainly playing on the outside. Brown had moved into the slot and played there quite a bit, but now he may have to go back outside unless Trayvon Diggs can win that job as a starting corner.
Greg, I wanted to go back with you on the defensive line because there's been so much movement there. But real quick, guys, first I want to tell you to download the DraftKings Sportsbook and Casino app now and use promo code ITB to play up to $200 of casino games risk-free. That's promo code ITB to play risk-free up to $200 for your first 24 hours of casino play on DraftKings Sportsbook. Got to be 21 or over. Call 1-800-GAMBLER. I wanted to ask you specifically on the D-line because the interior is completely changed. And, they used to have Malik Collins on the inside, used to have Antoine Woods, and they were very known under Rod Marinelli for twisting, a lot of ET stunts, a lot of games up front. Is this the kind of person is that a Mike Nolan ideology as well? And is this kind of personnel to do that, or do you see that changing?
Well, we don't know the answer to that. I mean, the Cowboys last year in their sub packages did a couple of things that were foundational. They stunted a lot, and they also lined up in what I call a tilted front, where they'd have 3 defensive linemen to one side of the center, and Jaylon Smith would kind of be the joker, kind of moving up and into the line of scrimmage, backing off. Very often he'd be part of stunt packages and rush the quarterback. They did more of that as the season progressed, and Smith became a pass rusher. So the question is Mike Nolan going to do that? We don't know the answer to that. They have different defensive tackles, and they even drafted one from Oklahoma, Neville Gallimore. They have Tristan Hill, who was a second-round pick a year ago, who showed flashes. So they've got a lot of depth at the D tackle position. We don't know what Mike Nolan's approach will be when they're in their sub fronts. Last year people knew what they did and they were pretty good at it. And Jaylon Smith was very effective kind of in that joker role as kind of a movement sub linebacker. So we'll see what they do. McCoy at his best certainly has quickness off the ball. If sacks are your determinant for whether a guy's a great pass rusher, he's never been a great sack artist given his skill set. And he's not likely to all of a sudden become one at this point in his career.
Gregg Bradley and I don't know if you saw him out of Utah. He's a guy that a lot of personnel people brought up to me. I'll tell you what, he had one issue at the combine. He ran a very slow 40. I've always said, like, if you're worrying about a D lineman running a 4.9, that's really not realistic. You're worried about the 10. So he's a kid that I know some personnel people talked to me about. It probably should have gone higher. I don't know if you saw him, but this guy.
Yeah, he's one guy I missed, so I don't know. But what you just said reminded me of the old Brian Billick story when they drafted Terrell Suggs out of Arizona State, and you probably remember the story. And Suggs ran a 4.8, and that dropped him in the minds of people. Obviously, the Ravens drafted him, and the Ravens have been very good drafters over the years. And Billick's comment was, when it's 40 yards to rush the quarterback, then I'll worry about it. But, yeah.
Exactly.
But they've got some interesting players. Look, who knows what Alden Smith is at this point in his career? Alden Smith was a beast now. Yeah. Who knows? They have a player they drafted last year who I couldn't believe lasted until the 7th round. I have no idea what they think about him, Jalen Jelks, who played at Oregon, and I thought he was a really interesting prospect coming out of Oregon as a kind of long, lanky pass rusher. So I don't know. But they've got a lot of depth. Even Dorrance Armstrong, he played a lot of snaps for them last year. So it's a D-line that has a ton of depth, and how it shakes out in specific situations remains to be seen, other than we know DeMarcus Lawrence will be on the field in every package.
We know Van Der Esch battled the injuries last year. How did you feel in general, though, looking at Jaylon Smith about his year compared to 2 years ago, which he obviously had such a wonderful year with Van Der Esch and got the extension. But I felt like I was hearing out of Dallas that he did not match the year before. Did you see that?
You're talking about Jaylon Smith?
Jaylon Smith, yeah.
Yeah, I thought he was asked to do a little bit more last year. I just think he's a really good player. I mean, we can debate, you can start nitpicking about better year, not as good a year, but he's a good player. He's certainly not a weakness. He's asked to do a lot. He was last year. Again, we don't know what Mike Nolan will ask him to do, but he's big, he's athletic, he certainly can play sideline to sideline. He's got some physicality to him. They don't ask him a whole lot to cover tight ends, so that's not really something he does. He was used much more in their sub as a pass rusher. every once in a while in base, you get stuck. You have to cover tight ends. I know the Eagles exploited him a couple of times over the last couple of years when they were in their base, because the Eagles play a lot with 2 tight ends, and they get matched up with Smith on a tight end, and they took advantage of that a little bit. I don't know if that's the strength of his game, given how athletic he is, but in their sub defenses, he's very good.
Greg, if you're an opponent that could spread him out, do you attack that secondary? Because you were talking about the front seven looks to be pretty good. Is that how you got to beat them? You go against those corners?
Well, I think when you look at their defense, you feel you can attack their corners for sure. And as we said, we assume Awuzie is one corner. Brown right now is listed as the other corner. We don't know how it'll play out. I mentioned Trayvon Diggs. They also drafted Reggie Robinson in the 4th round. So we don't know how all this will play out.
And their safeties too.
I think Woods. I like Xavier Woods. I think he's pretty solid. They have Clinton Dix, who I'm not sure is as good a player as people think he is. I don't think he's a bum, but I don't think he's a dominant player. And I think the proof's in the fact that he's been with a number of teams. Adam, you know that he's moved around a lot. Correct. Guys like that, if they're really good, they don't move around that much.
All right, we're going to put a bow on Dallas really quick. First, I want to tell everybody, make sure you're checking out PHLSportsNation.com, enhancing the fan experience with their coverage of the Phillies, the Eagles, the Sixers, the Flyers, their podcast, their great content. Make sure you go to PHLSportsNation.com and read all of their great coverage. For the fans, by the fans is their motto. And we're going to pause real quick for a word from our other great sponsors. Okay, Greg. One thing we've mentioned here is and you've kind of expanded on some of their draft picks. The Cowboys did get, and I get it. It's until they play, you never know. But they got a lot of accolades. I mean, to be able to get Lamb where they got Lamb, and then Diggs in the 2nd round. You mentioned Gallimore in the 3rd, Na in the 5th. The kid Reggie Robinson in the 4th too. It sounds like. Oh, and the Wisconsin center. I mean, people seem stunned that they got. Yeah. I'll never pronounce his name. Is it Biadasz? Tyler Biadasz?
Yeah, I'm guessing. Yeah, that it's kind of an odd name, but Greg.
It's a Wisconsin name, no doubt.
Well, he fits the run game. Yeah, so
and all I can do, and I'm not one of those people that says they reached or this or that, or they could have gotten him later. I can only speak to the players based on how I evaluated them watching tape. So that's all I can do. I really like Trayvon Diggs. I thought he was arguably the 3rd best corner prospect in this draft. That was my opinion of tape study. I'm not a big list guy, but that's what I thought after Okudah and Henderson. He's big, he's physical, he has speed, he played the ball really well. Again, being a rookie and not having the benefit of an on-field off season, who knows? But I think Diggs has clear starting outside talent in the NFL as a corner. And I think he's one of those guys that you like as a corner because he's somewhat of a tempo setter, because there's a physicality and competitiveness to his game. So I really like Diggs. I mean, they even have Darryl Worley, who's been around the league and has probably, I don't know how many starts he has in the league, but he's got meaningful starts. So they've got a lot of guys to choose from. It all depends on how it plays out.
How do you see the Cowboys in general? When we tie this all together, I think a lot of people believe that the division, if everyone is kind of what they're supposed to be, will come down to Eagles and Cowboys, as the other two teams are kind of growing right now behind their quarterback and coaches. Do you, from a talent standpoint, how do you see the Cowboys?
Well, I think offensively they've got a ton of talent. They put up big numbers last year, which wasn't enough to get them into the playoffs or over the hump. And the problem was they had, with all that offensive talent, they had too many poor offensive games. And it's always hard to know the answers. I mean, I know people say, well, they're not consistent. That's one of those words that it means different things to different people. And I know when people look at their offense last year, they feel that against the really good defenses, they didn't perform particularly well. But they certainly have talent. I'm anxious to see how CeeDee Lamb fits in. Prescott is a good player. I wouldn't say Prescott is a great player. I think he's a good, solid NFL starting quarterback. He's got a lot of pluses and some things that he still needs to work on and clean up. They've clearly got a top-level back. I would expect their offense to be explosive in given games. Whether it can be that way week in and week out, that's what they're trying to achieve because they certainly have the personnel where they should have that kind of offense.
All right, Greg, 3 down, one to go. We've done Washington, New York, and Dallas. We have tapped into your brain and your mindset. We very much appreciate it. And next time we talk to you, we will be doing the Philadelphia Eagles. And I know everyone's very excited to hear your thoughts on this new look Eagles team. So once again, as always, we thank you so much. Greg Cosell, NFL Films, senior producer, host of ESPN's NFL Matchup Show. We'll see you one more time.
All right. Looking forward to it.
That will do it for Inside the Birds, the leading podcast in Eagles Intel. Big thanks, of course, to Greg Cosell. He'll help us continue this NFC East breakdown one more time with the Philadelphia Eagles in our next podcast. Thanks to our producer, Hunter Brody. Check him out, Sports Talk with Broads on YouTube. Check out his podcast called Processed that he does with former Villanova basketball star Darrell Reynolds. And check out Hunter's work on Twitter at Broads81. As always, we thank you for flying with us. Inside the Bird.